So I've wanted to hold off making a Battlefield 5 review until I'd sunk enough time into getting a feel for the meta and everything that this game has to offer. I know there's a lot of Battlefield veterans out there wondering if Battlefield 5 is going to be the game for them, if this is going to bring back that magic. And I've been trying to think of that one phrase that sums up how I feel about this game. And this is what I have so far. Battlefield 5 is the best unfinished Battlefield game that I've ever played. What's that mean exactly? Well, first of all, it means it's good. Like, really good. The gameplay is fun, the squad play is better than ever, the gunplay is highly skillful, and the maps are just stunning. However, it's just not a finished game. It's loaded with bugs, design concepts that are poorly implemented, and barely functional menus, or sometimes non-functional menus. And as bad as that sounds, it's certainly not a deal breaker, especially for a Battlefield game. In fact, when comparing the bugginess of this launch to previous Battlefield games, it's kind of on par with some of them, even better off than games like Battlefield 4, where the server performance issues were so bad that many players simply couldn't play the game within the first few weeks or even months of its release. So considering how Battlefield games have launched in the past and that games like Battlefield 4 are now hailed as some of the best Battlefield games of all time, I am not at all worried about the state of Battlefield 5 right now. It's very fun to play, and I can only imagine what it's going to become once DICE really irons out all the little annoying bugs. Really, the biggest disappointment of the Battlefield 5 launch has nothing to do with the launch itself and more of the reveal and the hype process for the game, which was honestly one of the worst marketing campaigns that I've personally ever seen. They also followed it up with a release schedule that confused most of the player base, people not knowing when their version of the game was going to come out or what they had to do to play it first and why some players got it earlier than others. It was very confusing, and honestly, I just can't think of any way they could have mucked up the launch and the hype for this game any more than they did. Now the question becomes, can one of DICE's most promising games overcome their worst marketing? That's a question that only time can answer, but today we're going to talk about what makes Battlefield 5 great, and also mention the crappy buggy elements too. Let's get right into it with the gunplay. Most of what you do in a Battlefield game is shoot at other players, and if that doesn't feel right, well, then you have a big problem. I'm happy to say that the gunplay here feels amazing. There's no more visual recoil, spread mechanics are minimal, and weapon recoil learning is very intuitive. Hipfire has taken a huge nerf since Battlefield 1, so aiming down sight is encouraged once again with all guns except for maybe SMGs in close range. Suppression affecting your weapon's accuracy is no longer a thing. I repeat, suppression is no longer something that will cause you to miss your perfectly aimed shots. So that 7-year experiment is finally over, and gunplay now feels more skill-based than ever. Furthermore, grenade play is no longer the spammy, rage-inducing mess that it was in Battlefield 1. Grenades now have longer detonation timers, giving players ample time to run away or even pick them up and throw them back at enemies. Also, you can shoot grenades, allowing for some insane skill shots if you don't want to give your enemies time to run away. Though, I will say the grenade indicators are pretty hard to see at times, so occasionally you will die without even realizing you were within the blast radius of a grenade. The new attrition system, which affects ammo and health regen, puts a cap on grenade spam as well. You will no longer auto-recharge grenades, and ammo pouches and boxes don't refill your grenade inventory. Ammo boxes can still replay some of the explosives in the game, but it's slow and you have to manually interact with them, so basically grenade spam and most explosive spam is dead. Also, now that it's better balanced from the beta, the attrition system is actually a nice addition, rewarding you for good squad play, but not really punishing you too hard if you don't have good teammates. Melee mechanics are no longer OP, and they don't give newbie players an easy win button when you can't aim your weapon properly in close quarters. It's going to take you quite a few hits to take down your enemy in close quarter combat, and so you're really going to prefer to use your guns instead of melee whenever possible. Melee really just becomes that last-ditch effort to try and deal with somebody when you're completely out of options. Conquest finally feels like Conquest again, and comebacks are much more frequent and exciting, although DICE kind of cheated this a little bit, making it easier for the losing team to capture flags. but apparently they're fixing this and they're going to make it a bit more of an honest conquest system within the next patch or so. Also, I no longer have to accept defeat with 5 minutes left in a conquest match, but instead survey the map and figure out what I can do to try and turn the tides. You never really give up hope until there's just a few tickets left now, which is it's a nice feeling to come back to. There's also a big progression system allowing, for the first time ever, the ability to customize your character's face, headgear, torso, and pants. And I gotta say, a lot of the character cosmetics look really cool. The downside is that the camouflages don't adapt to the environment you're in, so if you put on snow camo and you're playing around in a green map, you're gonna stick out like a sore thumb. Many of the clothing items do have different camo patterns for each environment, so perhaps at a later date DICE can implement some sort of adaptive camo option. Squad play is above and beyond what it's ever been in any previous Battlefield game. First of all, you can work together to call in reinforcements like flying bombs or powerful tanks to try and turn the tides. Also, squad members can revive other squad members even if you're not the medic class. It will take longer though if you're not a medic class, but it's just one more reason to stick together as a squad. Plus, if you have a well-balanced squad with medics and supports, then you can make sure that everybody's topped off with health and ammo. Since health doesn't auto-recharge this time, you actually have to manually use a health pack to get yourself back up to full health. Plus, DICE toned down the amount of points that you used to get from distributing ammo and health, which used to be absolutely insane. You could throw an ammo pack and get way more points than you get for killing an enemy player. Now this has been reduced a bit, and there's a lot of points emphasized on defending and attacking points, which is interesting, and I might get into more of that on a different video in terms of how that affects the meta and whatnot. But overall, the point distribution system is a lot better for squad play and team play. Destruction is better. It's more dynamic, detailed, and has functional bullet penetration systems that recognize different material and different caliber bullets. With all that, the new medium machine guns can do more than just suppress enemies. They can also shoot people behind cover, which is pretty darn cool. You can even snipe people through wooden fences and whatnot. Some of this was possible in previous Battlefield games. It is just far more advanced than it's ever been. And then, of course, there's the graphics. They're simply amazing. Don't believe the Battlefield 1 reskin rubbish you may have heard. Battlefield 5 is a considerable step beyond what Battlefield 1 was. The map Eros is just breathtaking, and fighting on it resembles basically what I thought of as a kid of what I thought first-person shooters could be like one day. Particle effects are dialed up to 11, and smoke is created by much more than just smoke grenades, but also the afterblast from explosions and gunfire hitting surfaces. It might actually be a bit overkill to an extent, but we can talk about that later. Also, planes look gorgeous and get destroyed very realistically. I've had to stop mid-combat a number of times just to admire a flaming aircraft plummeting towards the earth. The other maps, of course, are also very beautiful. Sadly, they aren't the super iconic locations from World War II, but once you're in and playing, you probably will forget about that. Conquest plays pretty darn well on most of the maps, and the gameplay is quite varied from your tight-knit infantry maps to giant sprawling maps with tanks and planes everywhere. The smaller infantry-focused modes like TDM are surprisingly fun as well. Building fortifications on maps, although gimmicky at most times, also allows for greater map knowledge and secret structures that might open up new flanking routes. Despite launching with only 8 maps as opposed to Battlefield 1's 9 or Battlefield 4's 10, these 8 each bring a unique quality and replayability factor to them, and there's at least one mode on each map that's absolutely great. Oh, and in case you missed it, which is entirely possible considering how the marketing for Battlefield 5 went, all the post-launch content is free for everyone who owns the game. No more community splitting with premium or weapons that you can only get if you buy a DLC. Now everyone can get everything outside of maybe some really high-end cosmetic items or deluxe edition skins. And although this feature really isn't something that you're going to notice as much at launch with the game, over time I think it's going to be one of the best changes that DICE could have made for this franchise. So this will be something that we are seeing the benefits of over the next 2 years. Anyway, what I've just mentioned are the best things about Battlefield 5. There's of course many other really great things about BF5, but those are sort of the top biggest things that have changed or that I think are the most attractive features. But of course, everything isn't sunshine and rainbows. Let's talk about some of the unfinished or poorly implemented and buggy aspects of the game. Starting off with the user interface. It is so Bad. This is not a debatable subject. It's objectively the worst UI any Battlefield game has ever had. It's unintuitive. It takes about 5 more clicks than it should to do basic things. It overcomplicates things like picking a skin for your weapon and doesn't allow you to specialize your guns or switch assignments while in game. Joining on friends is extra weird since you can't do it if they already have a full squad from random players. Company coin, which is used to upgrade your weapons and unlock cosmetics, is very sparse, like someone didn't do the math to figure out how much you might need to give to players so that they can unlock stuff. There simply isn't enough to split between cosmetic unlocks and weapon unlocks. Do not purchase any cosmetic items until you've unlocked everything you want for weapons and vehicles. I learned this one the hard way. Exiting a match takes forever, joining a match takes forever, alt-tabbing for PC players takes forever, and sometimes quick match puts you into an empty server. The squad spawning menu is still pointless in my opinion, and the down but not out state is a little awkward to say the least. Infantry loadouts are faction specific for seemingly no reason other than to annoy the heck out of players, and forgetting to hit the new equip button in the UI has caused me to spawn into battle with the wrong gear probably hundreds of times at this point. All that said, the UI is not a deal breaker because once you're in the game and actually playing, it's a damn good time, but holy hell, it's a train wreck of a user interface. DICE has already stated that they plan to fix many of these issues as I've mentioned, but as of right now, they're not currently fixed. Let's talk about the bugs. Battlefield 1 really spoiled us. DICE tricked me into thinking that they had turned a corner and Battlefield games would launch without any major issues and great performance from day one. But alas, DICE is back to its old ways. There are hundreds of new bugs, and the worst of them really revolve around the time to death experience. Basically, the time between taking damage and then finally dying. This is insanely fast right now. It's inaccurately fast, and I've been watching and studying it for a while. I have a feeling it goes beyond just bad netcode and damage stacking, but also involves improper animations and sound effects being delayed or not even playing at all. This is particularly frustrating coming from Battlefield 1's excellent netcode to this, which sours a lot of the firefights where you thought you had an upper hand and then just die instantly. It kind of feels like each Battlefield game is starting over from the ground up when it comes to netcode, and I'm not really sure why this particular aspect of Battlefield games has to go through so much overhaul, especially when previous titles had it locked down. Copy and paste, DICE. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Battlefield 1 had great netcode. I'm not sure why the whole firefight process had to go through an overhaul. Sound bugs are rampant in the final build, which is particularly frustrating since it was a big part of the alpha and beta feedback, yet we still see it in the final game. Often, enemy footstep sounds just don't play at all, and now that spotting and intel is massively reduced, audio is more important than ever. Again, coming from Battlefield 1, which had this nearly perfected, we now have excessive sound ducking, footsteps not playing, and sometimes gun sounds triggering late. Also, gun sounds are just harder to pinpoint in general. I'm not sure what changed, but they sound more distant. So if someone's gunning down your squad mates behind you, it might actually sound like a distant firefight rather than an imminent threat. On the other hand though, planes do sound great, and if you're just watching somebody play online, you might think that the sound engine is immaculate and superb. It's not that the sound effects themselves don't sound stunning or that DICE's audio team isn't capable of making great sound. There's just something off and there's a lot of bugs, and it really does make it harder to use sound strategically. PC performance is okay, but there are some pretty significant frame rate hiccups often. It's not game-breakingly bad, but again, being used to a well-optimized Battlefield 1 and then coming over to this, it does feel a bit uncharacteristic to have so many frame rate drops cropping up. Often it'll happen during firefights. Again, it's not frequent enough to make it game-breakingly bad, but the game's definitely going to need to go through some visual optimizations to get rid of these hiccups. Bipod and ADS mechanics tend to break a lot. This is a combination of bugs and probably just a poorly designed bipod system, but often when you're trying to ADS from a bipod, it just doesn't work. This is especially frustrating when you're trying to use a medium machine gun that can only aim down sights from a bipod, and not being able to do so even when properly deployed will get you killed a lot of the time. Sometimes you'll holster your weapon because you're too near a wall, but then you'll walk away from the wall and you'll try an ADS and it doesn't work even with non-bipoded weapons. And again, not to keep repeating myself here, but Battlefield 1's bipod system worked fine. I don't know why DICE felt like they needed to redesign it, because I really prefer the old system. Alright, now that's kind of it for the top bugs and major issues with the game. Let's talk about some of the design issues, the things where DICE decided to go one way and they're just not really working out so well for the game balance and whatnot. Now that I've sunk quite a few hours into every mode and every map, the most commonly infuriating thing is player visibility. People just blend right into the scenery on most maps. The fact that there's a forced anti-aliasing setting on PC really doesn't help, as it kind of just blurs everything in the distance, making it even harder to see what's an enemy versus what's just a rock. If you ever played the map Passchendaele in Battlefield 1, which is the muddy trench warfare map where the Germans wear dark brown or dark gray uniforms that just blend right in with the mud, it's kind of like that, but without any spotting at all. So yeah, break out your glasses and prepare to get constantly frustrated by the unseeable players. The enhanced particle effect system really doesn't help by adding excessive dust and debris everywhere. It certainly looks very beautiful and cinematic, but it also replaces skill and tactics with a large dose of chaos in just about every map. Some people may enjoy it, but I'm not one of them. Flying airplanes is not the most enjoyable experience. They feel a bit sluggish, dogfights feel clumsy, bullet convergence isn't particularly great, especially for shooting infantry targets, and the bombers in the game can destroy an entire enemy team in one pass if you time it correctly. It's a hard subject to talk about because most people don't fly airplanes and they don't really care if pilots are having a good time or not, but I like to play every aspect of Battlefield, and honestly, you've got one side where the bombers just destroy everything and can be super annoying, and the fighters just don't really do much other than shoot down bombers, but when it comes to interacting with ground targets, they feel very limited. The lack of a spotting system means you're not going to see any targets on the ground for doing machine gun strafing runs, and DICE's plan to have infantry spotting assist pilots has basically failed. So the idea is that ground targets would mark everything and then the pilots would come in and take them out. That's just not happening, and it's not because people haven't unlocked the right gadgets or learned the meta. It's just not going to happen, DICE. You need a new system. Tanks now have some new and interesting balance mechanics, but they also have a very rushed control setup. The new control scheme feels borrowed from World of Tanks, except that DICE just did it worse. Third-person turning and aiming feels very off, and when you switch to the first-person perspective, it's an entirely different control scheme. Everything about controlling tanks in Battlefield 5 feels very clunky, and I've played a lot of games that use tanks with fixed turn speeds for their turrets, like World of Tanks, War Thunder, and World War III, all of which have vastly superior setups. All DICE had to do here was just try and copy these games better. The new gun specialization system is interesting. Instead of allowing weapon attachments to affect performance, now a progression tree lets you pick how to modify your gun's performance. The problem right now is that you can't alter this in game, so if you don't like what you picked, you have to exit a match and change it, or do it in between rounds in the limited time. I really don't mind having the cosmetic aspects of a weapon being independent from its performance. That's fine with me. It's just that the current system is so clunky that it doesn't allow you to adapt your setup to a new combat situation. If you were enjoying a weapon for its long-range capabilities or the long-range spec that you built it for, now you can't adapt it on the fly if you're in a close-quarter map. And that's the biggest takeaway from the system right now, and I think DICE has to change it. And they have mentioned that they do have plans for it, but once again, the UI stuff has not been updated. Those are my big gameplay design issues. Of course, there's a lot of other little things and stuff I can talk about in future videos, but those are kind of the main things right now. Outside of gameplay, one of the more confusing choices that DICE has made was to focus on unknown battles from World War II. We're talking about World War II here, the most iconic and well-known war of all time, and DICE releases their game with virtually none of the major iconic battles. D-Day, Stalingrad, Iwo Jima, Battle of the Bulge. I could list off every major battle. They're not going to be in this game. Again, this is a AAA World War II game, not some indie game looking for some interesting niche. Heck, the Americans aren't even a faction, nor are the Japanese or the Russians. DICE acts like we're all tired of these played out battles, but it's been 15 years since they made Battlefield 1942, and I'm certainly not tired of iconic World War II battles. I honestly think they did this because COD focused on some of the big battles for their game, and DICE felt like they had to differentiate themselves or something. But what it's really done is just killed a huge amount of their marketing potential. Guess what? Maybe D-Day's been done a billion times, but it hasn't been done in a modern Battlefield game for a long time, 15 years. I want to see a modern Battlefield D-Day. That's what I'd like to see. I also want to see all those other big iconic battles that were in Battlefield 1942, yet they're nowhere to be found. Just a massive, massive marketing opportunity missed here, and I really hope it doesn't affect this game's long-term sales too much. I hope DICE can maybe include it with some DLC content and get people hyped back up for the game, because the game itself is really good. It's really fun. The maps are well designed and they're beautiful. They're just not iconic. They're not marketable. And this is a mistake. It doesn't really relate too much to the inner meta of the game, but from a marketing and just nostalgia aspect, I think DICE screwed up here pretty big. Alright, now despite my fairly long list of issues with Battlefield 5, it's still a very good game that could easily become a great game, maybe even the best Battlefield game ever made. The gameplay is fun. It's addictive, it has jaw-dropping moments, and really draws players in together for some awesome teamwork. Even though many aspects feel rushed, the innovation is still there, and the gameplay meta has improved because of it, and the skill ceiling has also increased substantially. As a veteran player, I am very happy with most of what Battlefield 5 brings to the table, and I look forward to a far greater and further refined experience that we will get in the coming months. The main difference this time around is that instead of being fundamentally against DICE's design choices with gameplay as I was in Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5 just suffers from being a rushed game and the problems that come with it. And if there's one thing that DICE has proven time and time again, it's that they know how to fix a buggy, unfinished game. So it's not really a question of if Battlefield 5 will get better, but really more of a when. And in the meantime, it's still a great experience with some annoying bugs that can be overlooked in the short term. And again, as a Battlefield veteran player, this is, well, unfortunately par for the course when it comes to Battlefield launches, and I'm kind of used to it at this point. Oh yeah, there's a single player too, and it's meh at best. I really don't want to talk about it any more than that. If you played Battlefield 1 single player, it's like that, but World War II. Anyway, that wraps it up for my initial review of Battlefield 5. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend this game to anyone who enjoys multiplayer shooters and enjoys Battlefield games. I'm really looking forward to playing the heck out of this game and watching it grow over the next 2 years. I'll see you guys next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.